Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, we'll have the latest in the controversy over the actions of Phoenix police in apprehending a family of shoplifting suspects. Also tonight, Corporation Commission Chair Bob Burns talks about the governor's concerns that the commission is exceeding its authority. And new research looks to find the perfect asphalt by using recycled materials. Those stories and more next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. The controversy over allegations of excessive force by Phoenix police continues. City Council had a budget meeting this afternoon, but a recent high-profile case involving shoplifting suspects dominated the agenda. Protesters were upset over the use of force in the case, which involved the shoplifting of a doll at a dollar store by the 4-year-old daughter of Drayvon Ames and Aisha Harper. Council members listened to the repeated criticism of the police, though not everyone on the council was swayed.
And I think that there needs to be another side of this. There needs to be another side of the public that shows that what is being done here today is a travesty. It's attacking their families. It's attacking everybody else, and it's wrong.
Earlier today, a rally was held to protest the use of force by Phoenix police. Demonstrators called for an oversight board of civilians and other reforms.
Police violence and the culture of violence ends at the shootings and killings of brown and black bodies, but it starts in how they police us, when they stop us, when they arrest us, how they profile us, how they speak to us, how they work with immigration enforcement. All of that is a culture of this violent police department.
Demonstrators also demanded that the officers in the case be fired. So, when can law enforcement use the kind of force Phoenix officers used in this case, and what justifies such a response? Joining us now is attorney and former police officer Anthony Ramirez of the firm My Arizona Lawyers. Welcome to Arizona Horizon.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you. What do we know about what happened on May 27th? What do we really know?
Well, obviously that's still under investigation. I think what we know from what we saw on the video was an ugly use of force. And, all use of force is ugly. And I think that the question that needs to be asked is, at the end of the day, was that force reasonable? I
was going to ask you, did they respond too aggressively?
So when you're looking at these types of cases, the first thing that you have to analyze is what right was being violated, okay? The Supreme Court has held that we have to understand what the right that is. And in this case, when we're talking about an investigatory stop or an arrest, that it's the Fourth Amendment standard. Okay, now once you understand that, then you go in and apply an objective reasonableness standard, not an excessive force standard.
Okay.
Okay.
So, but with that in mind, what we just saw looked to even the casual observer as excessive force. Is that what you saw?
What I saw was an officer, kicking the leg out of an individual that was standing, alongside of a car with his hands handcuffed behind his back. What I saw, to me, without having any of the facts of why the officer did what he did, was unreasonable. What we have to look at is what would an objectively reasonable officer do in that situation, knowing that it's a rapidly changing situation. With facts that we just don't have. Now, looking at it on its face, it appears to be unreasonable.
How are officers trained to respond in that? Obviously, every case is different, but in this kind of a situation, it seems, again, from a distance, that instead of diffusing the situation, the officers appeared to escalate the situation. How are they trained? What were they trained to do?
So the first thing that you have to do is understand the situation that you're in. So let's talk about what happened the other day. We had a call for an alleged shoplifting. Okay, that's hardly a violent crime. Okay, it wasn't a call for a violent kidnapping or some other type of call where an officer would be on alert. When you have a shoplifting call, an officer should approach in and obviously be on alert. You have cases where a simple traffic stop has turned into a use of a deadly force situation at the drop of a hat. So that's that ever-changing situation, and that's why the court has said that we need to look at it from the eyes of a reasonable police officer, given the circumstances at the minute that it was happening.
Yeah, we've heard police officers say in the report that there was concern that hands weren't being shown and orders weren't being followed. Again, does that justify the kind of language we heard and the kind of pointing of weapons at these shoplifting suspects?
Sure. So I heard what was said by the young lady in the video. I also saw and read what the police officer wrote in his report. And those are contradicting with one another. My experience has been is that there are some officers sometimes that will articulate the facts that it's taking place differently, and they will, won't always be what you see on the body cameras, and that's why I think body cameras are so good now.
Body cameras, you think they should be required for every police officer?
I do.
A functioning body camera?
It's interesting, police officers will, in other cases that I've handled, it's at their discretion when they turn them on.
Yes.
They have a large button there in the middle of their chest that they can put on, that they can press to turn on the camera. And in some circumstances, they don't turn them on. I think that it should be, again, I'm not familiar with the technology and certainly how can it work, but that they should be on constantly recording, not at the officer's discretion.
Do you think that Phoenix should have a civilian review board?
I do. The police department that I used to work under had a civilian review board. It was not popular with the officers. I don't think that they are, because these are civilians that aren't trained in law enforcement, looking at the actions and scrutinizing the actions of police officers. I don't think the officers would like it, but I think that the community would benefit from it.
What about investigation? Phoenix police say that the department will investigate this. Critics are saying that makes no sense. You should send it out to an outside agency. Does that make sense to you?
It does make sense. I think that the Phoenix Police Department has done a good job on certain investigations in the past. I think that recent activity, they would probably be served best by allowing another department to take a look at it. That being said, if it's another local department that's going to be looking at it, they have to do the right thing. They have to, in other words, if they see something wrong, they need to say something.
It's interesting. Why do these incidents keep happening, and why do so many of these incidents involve African Americans? What's going on out there?
I wish I knew. You do see it. I think that with the advent of cell phones, with the advent of the police officers that are using body-worn cameras, I think you're seeing a lot more documentation of something that's been going on forever. I think that this type of behavior presents itself from time to time. There are thousands, hundreds of thousands of police contacts every day, and I think that a small minority of those contacts result in events like this, but they're being documented, and you're starting to see it more and more often.
You're a former officer. You were trained to keep the peace. Is that training, has that changed? Are officers more on edge? Are they more, do they increasingly feel threatened? Because again, when most of us think of police, you think of peace officers. The job is to keep the peace. What we saw in that video was not keeping the peace.
Correct. Another aspect of a police officer's job is to enforce the law.
Yes. And,
peacekeepers, that's a completely separate facet of that job that they're supposed to be doing at the same time. And I think that, when police officers are trained, they are trained to look at situations. I know that at least where I was trained, they were trained to be, sensitive to ethnic and racial sensitivities, and to make sure that they're approaching these situations properly. Police officers, when they take the job, they know that they're going to be in danger. They know that they're going to be put in very precarious situations, and they should act responsibly. They should try their best to act appropriately under the situations.
Would you like to see, because most police officers do, I don't think anyone can argue that, most police officers do a great job. It's the ones that don't do a good job that make it to these stories. Do the ones that do a good job need to speak up more against the bad apples? I
think they should, and I think that they don't. And I think that their departments would be better served, and the community would be better served if they did. Everyone works with someone that might not be a great employee. Same thing with police officers. I think, you've heard the saying of the thin blue line. I can tell you that the officers that I know, they don't do that. They do the right thing. But however, there are officers that would see things out there that they don't say something, and they should. They absolutely should.
But they don't, because it's just not in the culture to do so?
Well, I think that, there's a stigma with when you're out there with other officers in these dangerous situations that, they have to watch each other's backs. And again, when it comes to safety, I think that they absolutely should. But when it comes to, observing something that's inappropriate and having the officers' backs in that capacity is not proper.
Last question real quickly, we're running out of time.
Sure.
Should these officers, do you think, be immediately suspended pending the investigation?
From my understanding, they're on an administrative duty right now. These officers, in my opinion, they do have a right to due process just like we all do. The individuals that they stopped that day had a right to due process that, in my opinion, was not properly followed, again, my opinion. But they also have a right to due process. And I think that, the public, if the city and the police department should communicate better what that process is and how the investigations work so that the public understands. But I do think that the police officers do have a right to due process.
Anthony Ramirez, great information. Good to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.